we'll do that as part of because they're new governance arrangements and the new working arrangements between GLA and the Fire Commissioner. We'll be looking at that as part of our VFM assessment, which we'll be doing from now through until the point that we provide our opinion and conclusion to you in July.
July?
Yes.
I see. Thank you. I think Keith has a point on a little bit further on.
Yeah, on page 55.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering, clearly you've got the fees.
Yeah.
Just inquiring about. You've got under London Treasury Limited, TBC.
Yep.
Do you have any clear idea what that might be?
So, not at this stage. I think we're just at the early stages of accepting the appointment to perform the audit, and then obviously we'll need to go through a scoping exercise and determine I suppose the value of the transactions, what's in the accounts, how much work will be required to provide an opinion on them. I mean, we can report back as soon as that's agreed, if that would be helpful to a future audit panel.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
And who's doing the scoping as to what you'll be looking at?
We will be.
You will?
We will be, as the audit team, yes. In line with our, the audit requirements.
Yeah.
So those are set down by international standards of auditing. It's not
so
a free
you
rein.
decide how much you're going to do, and then you decide how much you're going to charge us for the privilege of doing it.
Because we don't yet know what the entity's going to do in years.
Yeah. Obviously, we'll need to agree it with officers.
Yeah.
Before we bring it back.
Anything, Jeanette, have you anything more that you'd like to ask? Or,
No, not at this stage.
Thank you very much. Anyway, thank you very much, Jeanette.
Okay.
Thank you, Ali. We move now to item 6 in our case, the internal audit reports, which is a positive avalanche of questions we've got, which we will deal with, and I'm sure will be dealt with very, very succinctly.
Could be worse, it could be a tsunami.
Well, avalanche, cornucopia, what do you want to call it? But, okay. We go first to the review of the GLA Open Project System. I know that Jeanette has a point she'd like to ask, but can you just introduce a little about the solution to us?
I think probably better David did that.
Sorry,
no, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is a review of the GLA Open Project System. This was a major project which was looking at replacing previous systems, of which some were over 15 years old. There was a mayoral decision approving an expenditure of £2.5 million to build a new grant and project management system. As part of the review, we identified 3 recommendations which were all agreed. These are listed and detailed on page 82. Obviously, willing to take any questions on the meat of the report, but there's Heath and Lucy and Jamie here as well to answer anything that the panel wish to raise. Just to show they're all target dates are all March 2019, so all within a nice short time frame for implementation. When we come back and do our follow-up review, we will report back to tell you whether that has happened. Yeah.
No, 18 months ago.
We'd report on that if that happened.
Yes, I've got a couple of. Sorry.
To Lucy.
I don't know. I'll be directed by you, Chair. Yeah, questions to Lucy. Starting with just a couple of queries, and go to our page 73, executive summary. 4.2 there talks about lesson plan had been identified and recorded by the project team. However, action to address items had not been recorded. Is that new practice, good practice, or why wouldn't you want to record?
Heath can
actions to address items.
I mean, Heath can update on this as well. But the way we run the project is through a number of retrospectives. And we had captured the lessons learned, we had captured some of the actions, but they probably hadn't been recorded formally enough. So we were working through on them, obviously, and putting the actions in place. But it probably wasn't there formally enough, and Heath can update on what we've done to put that in place since. If you want to update on that.
That's exactly it. So one of the key successes to the project is we're 100% agile. So we build incrementally, and we try to get feedback from users as soon as we possibly can, so then we can implement that into the system. Because of that, we do retrospectives with everyone involved in the business team and our supplier every 2 weeks. And we ask ourselves 3 key questions. What's going well? What's not going so well? And what should we continue to do? From those, we take some actions, and we have actions. But one of the things the audit report pulled out that what we should do is we should evidence when the actions are done, checked off. So that was quite helpful to us. All these recommendations have been implemented already. And we're actually looking to do a separate change to make it so it's even easier for some of our business users to implement these changes too. So we found this quite helpful.
Yeah. So we have been recording them, and they're recorded on post-it notes, and we followed up with them, but they weren't perhaps recorded formally on the system, which we're now putting a change into place so people can go back and see that they're there, and we can see exactly how they've been actioned on. So it was part of the process, but it probably wasn't as formal as it could be.
I suppose what would have been helpful if there was a note about that, or some explanation, because then that answers a number of questions that I have, again, about actions being identified, but there being no record to show if actions had been addressed. So in the system, I think that's a problem, because if anything, it's a waste of the inquirer's time. So give them an explanation to say, I don't know, by what date, whatever system you're working will be completed. Say, are you saying then by March 2019, if I was to go in the system, I would be able to see all the actions that have been identified at, say, 7.7 on page 82?
So
the GLA Ops Board meeting. Terms of reference of the GLA Ops Board. And that sort of information, will that sort of information be available by March 2019? Is that what you're saying?
There's a terms of reference now in place, and that's on what we call our wiki page, so everybody can see that, and that's been signed off by the board, so that's in place, and that is done. In terms of we're now put all the notes from our twice weekly retrospectives. Again, on the team's, it's what we call a Wikipedia page that all the team can see, so that they're all there, and we formally review and update all the actions at each bi-weekly retrospective. So that's just been put in place slightly more formally, where everybody can see it. So yes, that is all now in place, so and people can see that.
Okay, so it's
It had been previously done on post-it notes and things like that, but we have, so people could always see it, but it's now much more, it's much more formalised, so we've got it in 2 places.
okay.
On the 10.5, that's got priority 2 as a risk, so that will be done by March, right?
Yes.
that's already been done.
It's been done.
Yeah.
Why is it 2, not 3 then?
Well, the assessment at the time was that was priority 2. Obviously, we will follow up on those actions later in the year to ensure that they were completed in that time frame. But at the point and the time of the audit was undertaken, that was seen as a recommendation was of a 2 priority. Yeah.
Okay.
Great, okay. Thank you for that. So if we move now to the review of information governance implementation of the GDPR.
I think that can
escape, can they, if they
I'm
want
sorry?
to? They can escape if they want to. Can
Oh
they?
yes, indeed. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
I hope it was a meaningful experiment.
Of course.
Thank you very much. As opposed to a meaningful vote. Right. If we could move on to the implementation of the GDPR. I'd like to see the yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reference, I think you raised this probably this time last year as an area of that you found personal concern. So obviously this was also being fed into our audit plan. This is the result of that review. This was a key piece of legislation which is affecting not just the public sector but also the private sector. It came into effect in May of last year, 2018. There are 4 recommendations that we've identified, and those are detailed on page 101. But as an overall, as you will see from the detail in the report, that the GLA, and Ian will be able to take questions on those, but have developed a GDR implementation plan, which is a key aspect of ensuring that as an organisation, the GLA are compliant or moving towards compliance with the GDPR regulations. But obviously myself, or I'm sure Ian would be willing to take any questions that the panel may have.
Yeah, I mean, looking just as an overview, it seems quite clear. You can explain to me, but you've given it inadequate, as it were. Where in fact, you're saying governance arrangements are operating effectively, and there's a clearly defined action plan. Presumably, why would it not be substantial then?
Well, I think as recommendations, as you'll see from those recommendations, those are areas that we've identified. Some of them aren't going to be completed until May of next year. So it'd be very difficult for us to give a substantial erring on because of the nature of and the complexity of the data that's held within the GLA. Until such time as those is what's detailed in the implementation plan is implemented itself. It'd be difficult for us to give a rating any higher than adequate, and bearing in mind those recommendations that we've raised in itself.
And also, hang on, sorry, Jeanette. Also, just at the end, you say most GLA policies and procedures have been updated to reflect. When you say most, is that what? 3/4? I mean, it's
I'd have to look.
We're in a very exact science in this.
Well, we could have detailed the exact numbers. I think because of the fast-moving nature of those policies being reviewed, it is that the majority have been reviewed. However, until such time as they have all been reviewed and that they are deemed to be fully compliant, that's not to say that they aren't compliant. It's that the review has taken place to ensure that they are compliant. That we are erring on the side that they still need to be reviewed.
Because when we had a look at it, we looked at a sample anyway, so we didn't go through every single policy when we did it. So we're just highlighting the fact that there needs to be a little bit of a double check to go through the other policies as well. So we did pick a few specifics out as well. So
exactly, and then going back to the point, obviously when we come to do the follow-up review, we will be looking at what has been put in place as regards reviewing the policies, and to ensure that the processes are there to ensure that those are reviewed regularly. But initially they have been reviewed and are compliant with the GDPR legislation.
Yes, Chair. I mean, I'm not doing that. Last week I was in the chamber dealing with a member of the GLA group, and it's public knowledge about the Met's breach of data and the ICO's report on them, which was a damning report. I just think, this is as serious as anything else before that report, but especially now. And so I'm just wondering who can answer the question in terms of, again, going to that 4.3, There's a risk of the GDPR changes not being reflected by staff when performing certain activities leading to non-compliance and penalties imposed by the Information Commissioner's Office. So am I to read that that's not a pressing concern and that somebody shouldn't be on that to be picking up?
Ian, maybe you'd like to...
Chair, I'll take this one.
Yes, thank you, Tom.
Ian will come in with some of the detail if and when necessary, because he knows the cases better than I do. But in terms of the general approach, Chair, Jeanette's absolutely right that this is very much high up on our risk register in our minds, because we have not only notifiable breaches, but we've certainly had breaches. And when we've had breaches, some of the members of staff, to be honest, haven't been as aware of this at all, really, and that's worrying. And you'll see in the report one of the things that we're going to bring out is a mandatory e-learning module to complement the existing corporate governance e-learning module, so this will be specific to this area. So we're not at all complacent about this, because we've found that when there have been breaches, there can be individuals, middle ranking or sort of lower level, who have a particular project and can easily put stuff on our website involving people's personal addresses, other personal information, and that can be done very easily indeed. One of the things we're doing as part of that, although they are not directly responsible, we've asked the web people to just send to check stuff they're asked to put on the website. It's not their primary responsibility, but if they see something that looks a bit odd, we've had carers' home addresses put on the website by accident, things like that. If they, they're free to question it as much as anyone else if they feel uncomfortable about something. So, but the primary responsibility must lie with the sort of project managers for that particular thing. But then it's our responsibility in the centre to make sure they are well briefed and aware of it. So we're not at all complacent about this. We have had breaches. To be honest, we're going to have some more breaches because that's the nature of life. We're hoping we don't have a very serious one. But the report tries to set out some of the actions we're taking. And you'll have seen, and as David's already and Mark have already commented, you've seen in the action plan, there's a couple of priority one recommendations there. So this is a very serious area of work, as you've said. And Martin's kindly reminded me that one of the other things we're doing, which is also reported to the Assembly through the budget subcommittee, is the corporate health performance indicators are also tracking our performance in this area across a couple of KPIs. But this is across the whole organisation. Mayor's office, the policy departments, the party groups. This is an issue for all of us, and you can easily have a breach.
Absolutely. Well, I think all our minds will be focused when we know the results of the court case that's going on as well in the London Borough, and part of the GLA group sharing data inappropriately. And then going back to 1.2, there was a lack of technical tools to enforce compliance or identify and report notifiable breaches within specified periods. So is that part of the priority actions?
Yeah, so what 1.2 sets out the sort of the theoretical risks from the audit perspective that David and Mark would have had when they embarked on this piece of work. But all of these things, as you say, Jeanette, apply to us in one way or another. And I suppose it's what we put in place to try and mitigate some of those risks that is the important aspect of this. I mean, obviously we're trying to target it on those areas that we're familiar with, whether it's the volunteering section or some of the bits of the health policy team where there's particular issues around data involving members of the public. Then we will target those teams.
And then in 5.1 you talk about there's this clearly defined plan. Who owns that plan? I mean, is that Does the buck stop with you, Tom?
But yes, it's fine.
I'm always willing to put you in the hot seat, Tom.
I feel slightly nervous you've said that, but okay, yeah, I'll say yes.
This has been for 20 years or more, or nearly 20 years. This has been my ambition to put you in the hot seat. So,
20 years, my goodness, really?
I knew him when he was a boy. Well, maybe not 20, maybe 18. Maybe 18. So that would rest with you. Yeah. That's clarity we needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Where actually do you fit in with this organisation?
Ian reports to my team, but Ian's the expert on these matters. So, like, as Jeanette's pointed out, I'm accountable and responsible for it. But Ian, I thought it'd be useful if he came along because he clearly knows the sort of technical side of this area and he knows the cases. In case you want to talk about cases where we've had breaches, and is the data protection officer. So.
Can I just go back to just out of purely interest here? To the points that Jeanette was talking about, 1.2. Final one being GLA staff reluctant to provide personal details due to lack of trust which I understand that impulse. But how does one overcome that, actually? How do you overcome that?
People don't want to give their details, then that's a matter for them. I mean,
that's it.
It can come up in the business continuity plans, it can come up in other databases held if some people have felt that their details were shared with managers they weren't comfortable with and so forth, and didn't want to do it. So people don't want to do it. They don't want to do it.
They don't, yes, exactly. That's it. Right. Do you have anything? No, nothing. No, great. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ian, that you didn't have more of an input to help. do try our hardest. You can't force people.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, great. So we can just to go on now. We're on to review of material financial systems, creditors, debtors, and payroll. I do know we've got a question here. Could you introduce?
Yes, thank you, Chair, again. Yes, so this is part of the audit plan that focuses on the key financial systems. In particular, we reviewed, as part of this work, the creditors, debtors and payroll systems. As you will see, there were 4 recommendations identified, and these are detailed on page 116. This received an adequate opinion that the control work is adequate and key controls to mitigate risks are generally operating effective. But as you will see from the recommendations, there are some areas that need addressing, and yes, there are 3 recommendations which detail those areas that need some work being undertaken.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I've heard answers the queries that I've got in terms of the work being dynamic and so in progress, if you like. I mean, it just concerned me and seemed just a little bit of slackness that things weren't in files in some cases. And, again, going back, when we talked there about references for new starters, this whole thing about our cells being stolen because of data, because of information, it just makes me feel so uncomfortable when I read things like that, because I think it speaks of a slackness and a sense of not really appreciating how important information is. I think it's this whole thing about a crowded desk that's left at the end of the night with people's data on it, that sort of thing. So that's what spooked me in reading this. But what I've heard seems to me there's, going from what Mr. Middleton has said, if he's responsible for this bit.
Well, just to reassure you, Janet, on the
there's a sense it's work in progress.
Well, I know you've mentioned some of the HR aspects of this, but just to reassure you on that, you mentioned references and payroll checks and so forth. And those things clearly happen regardless, but there will be some proposals coming to the next oversight committee which, you know, sharpen up that and give the resource to that team to do those things, and you'll see some sort of welcome improvements in that area, I'm sure, because it will, that team structure will reflect some of the things in here around the operational side of HR. So I think you can rest assured that some improvements happening in this area.
Just as an afterthought, Tom, because that feeds the sort of thing that Peter raised about staff not having confidence. You know, I mean, being able to say a system is as robust and, you know, that you can feel secure.
Yeah. If an individual has a bad experience, like an overpayment or underpayment or something like that, then yes, they will feel that the system hasn't worked for them. But I mean, I think on most days for most people it does work, and clearly the auditors as they're meant to have picked up occasions when it hasn't worked, but most of the time it does work, and you know, the payroll is reconciled. So you don't need to worry about that. We're not losing money.
Yep. Can we just note that would be great. And moving on to the review of administration and management of GLA loans.
Okay.
I have a few questions for myself.
Certainly. So yeah, just a quick outline. So we reviewed the administration and management of GLA loans. We identified 6 recommendations detailed on page 136. The overall opinion is that we've given it adequate assurance. Just to give you some background to that, the sort of value of loans that we're talking about is amount to sort of 480 million. So that's the sort of throughput of money that the GLA are loaning out, and 1.2 sort of details the area of that. So it's provided by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government to the GLA to support mayoral priorities, and those funds have been allocated within Housing and Land, Regeneration and GLA Land and Property Limited to provide loans to external organisations. So the review was very focused on how that money is accounted for and obviously lent, and the processes that are in place to ensure that it's followed up. As I already mentioned, there were 6 recommendations identified, which are detailed from page 136 to 137. I'm sure myself, Jamie and Tom are willing to take any questions that yourself or the panel may have.
I mean, I see obviously that there are actions to be taken. My only, it's an observational thing really, David, was that there seems to be looking overall a kind of vagueness about the situation with loans. Because you're talking about an awful lot of money, and maybe this is reflected just in your opinion of being adequate, but you know, things come up, loans in place estimated to be a total value, right, you said that, but there is risk that loans are not processed correctly, the payment of loans may vary with each loan, etc. Most importantly, I found on page 4.8, on page 128, clearly defined reporting arrangements for loan not in place. Page 129, there are no corporate procedures governing the administration loan. The overall impression one gets is of kind of a slight ad hoc quality going on here.
Chair, can we just kind of make a comment at that stage? I think that's absolutely fair comment to make, and I think this audit has identified some areas in which we can definitely make some improvements.
Yes.
You'll appreciate from having read the report that some of this stuff is relatively new.
Yes.
Some of the things in Jamie's area, it's a new approach.
Yes.
Homes England, whatever they're called, they're doing similar things outside of London. So I think this is timely, it's helpful, and we take the points on board. I think it's probably worth identifying a few quite important steps we're taking, having seen this and having been aware of the issue. There are a couple of posts under Jamie that will, and one someone transferring from my team as a qualified accountant to look at some of the technical issues underlying the loan and some of the things you just said about payment terms and so forth.
And so there's two posts that we've created, and it's kind of 88% of the loan book here sits in housing and land, whether it's GLAP or GLA, so kind of most of it's clearly within my area. We've created those two posts immediately, so we've got some capacity. But they're two posts, yeah, who'll be portfolio managers, which then consolidates the responsibility for loan management into two people, so they're consistently doing it as a large part of their job, rather than it being just a little bit that's tacked on to quite a lot of people, which we thought was important. And those roles, we're proposing to make those permanent, and a proposal on that's coming to Oversight Committee at the end of the month as part of a package of housing and land posts, which we think is important to make this as robust as it possibly can be.
So I think that's a very important and welcome development. So that I think we've been pushed in the right direction here by audit. So that's very important. The second thing is worth highlighting in the context of this report, and maybe Martin's a better place than me to describe it, is given some of the risks arising, I think we're thinking of a new sort of escalation procedure almost to a quarterly meeting. But Martin might be a better place to describe that.
What this report mainly focuses on is the loans done by the housing land team. There is other loans which our regeneration team make. By and large, the oversight governance for them is via the LEAP, and I do sit on the LEAP board. We've also got financial instruments, sort of financial loans done by our wholly owned company, Funding London Investments, and then you've got our huge treasury management investment portfolio where you've got governance through the group investment syndicate, which all the CFOs from the group sit on. So you've got lots of different types of financial instruments, but what I think on this is sort of on the back of this audit, I think it'd be really helpful, and I'm going to implement it very quickly, for me to set up what I call an overview board of all our financial investments, keeping our balance sheet under closer review, because even though we've got robust and improving oversight in specific areas, I think we just make sure there is no gap. They are very sort of different in nature, so the intention is probably starting in sort of February, quarterly, we'll bring together, draw on all the reports from all the areas which are involved in the investments and loans, and take stock and just look at the risk profile for our balance sheet in its entirety, rather than in sort of discrete areas.
I see. Okay, that's sort of reassuring,
Yeah.
I think.
Sorry, Chair, does that then deal with 11.1, where about thought will be given to any further reporting required, I think? Is that what you were addressing? Page 138. Yeah, that recommendation
I think yes, I think that is really bringing that to flesh.
Bring it all
that.
together. Yeah, that sounds good.
But I think, GLA, either directly or indirectly, are probably involved in a wider range of loans or investments than covered by this audit, and that panel will cover it all. Because you've got loans, European Structural Fund money, which is loans, so it's picking all that up.
Right. Thank you very much, Martin. Thanks. Anything, Keith?
No, covered.
Okay.
Well done. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. We move on then to follow-up review of London Partners Governance Framework. I have no other questions on this. Thank you very much, Jamie.
Thank you. Okay.
Do you?
Do you want me to just say one thing? Sorry,
yes.
sorry to jump in there. This was a follow-up of our review in July 2018, and there were, of the 4 recommendations, they've all been implemented. I think, Keith, you identified at that about the 10 days, which if you look on page 13, that has come back, and although we found that as follow-up, page 13 of the main pack, so that's going back to pretty much the beginning. So this was the summary list of actions, and this refers to that point. I think everyone was, or panel members were concerned about the time frame of publishing the board meetings,
Right. Yeah.
and that refers to that. So that obviously then went towards us giving a substantial rating. Sorry, it's page 13 of the
main pack.
The main pack.
It's the summary list of actions David's referring to because it references L&P.
Yeah, it just references.
I've got it right, sorry, yeah.
I think this was the point you raised yourself at the time.
Right, got it, sorry.
So that's come from.
And that's happening now, is it?
It is, yeah.
I think L&P ended up publishing rather a lot of board minutes because the Assembly summons them all, didn't they?
Yeah. Chair.
Yes.
Just a query in terms of process. Will this report be referred or signposted to Economy Committee that raised many of these issues? London and Partners. It seems to me they answer some outstanding questions that were raised in scrutiny.
I'm sure Lauren could forward it on to a counterpart for the economy if they want to note it or something.
I think many years ago there used to be much more cross-referencing because I'm just thinking sometimes you sit on oversight and you really don't pick up the critical nature, you don't pick up the importance of a post in terms of critical action needed. Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes just as a member of that board, just knowing that other members are dealing with it and it then fits into their area of work and they're satisfied, I think that would be really helpful. I mean, it just seems sometimes you can spend a lot of time seeking the answer at a committee and they don't have it. But it would be in papers of this kind. I mean, I'm on budget monitoring and some stuff we uncover there, I then see other committees struggling with because there's been no cross-reference.
I agree.
So I don't know. I see the head of paid service in the room. Maybe that's something through you, Chair, that she can take away.
Can you take that away? Okay. Yes.
Yep.
Fine.
I think as you said, Jeanette, we used to do it more in the past, didn't we? And
Yes. Yeah. So you could just get through it because a group of your colleagues have sat through it for an hour and a half and have signed it off. And then you could just make the whole structure look ridiculous because you could reject something and then it's going to come back to that committee and officers are going to have to go and get that note and bring it back.
Yes. No. Great. Fine. Good. Thank you, Janet, for that. Thank you.
I'm so good on processing.
Yes. We're all becoming much more expert on that. Internal Audit Progress Report. Do you have any points you'd like to make?
Yeah.
I don't actually have any. You can just note that, can we? Yeah. Thank you very much. Therefore, can we note, please, the contents of those reports? Great. Move along to item 7, which is the monitoring of expenses and taxable benefits. The mayor, elected members and senior staff. Do you have any queries? Is there anything that leaps out at you that you'd like to? No? Can we note that?
Well, as Janet Arnold's been getting
What am I down for?
foreign travel here, I noticed.
Are you figuring hell? What, somebody paid for that? Well,
You declared it, darling.
and only right to. That's all I can say.
Thank you very much. That's item 7.
That's not right.
Item 7. Going on to item 8, work programme for the audit panel. We have something we might want to introduce here, actually, into the work programme. This is something that you particularly were interested in. Do you want to explain?
Indeed, yes. As we've noted in the earlier report from the external auditor, we've set up the London, what's it, London Treasury, that's it, Limited. And what I'd like to look at is how that interacts with the GIS.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'd quite like to do is if we could have a look at that, especially like how it's set up, who are responsible for investments for the authority, who's responsible for investments on the London Treasury Limited and so on. So we just have a look at the whole setup and then what checks and balances we have, what scrutiny we have of it and so on.
Could that actually be an item on an agenda? Just
Well, we've actually got this in our as part of the fourth quarter work. We are looking at the treasury management function,
right.
and those obviously those areas that you've identified. We're currently drafting terms of reference, but as part of the audit work that we undertake, we'll be looking at the syndicate and the arrangements and how that fits together. So that report will either come back to the March, depending on the time frame that we get to undertake the work, March Audit Panel or June. But obviously you're looking at the structures that's already, I think, available from my, because we've already got that information, so we can share that with you.
So half of your query is already there for you to find out, as it were.
Yeah.
But in terms of anything else, you say March or June, which
I'd hoped for March, but it depends on obviously accessing individuals and the normal problems you have with.
Well, maybe we can sit down and I can go through that.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
That's something you can just meet and discuss, is it?
I think that'd be useful.
Yeah, we can do that if put that arrangement in place. Yeah.
Okay. Right. But it would be quite good if we, as a committee, could hear what you would guess. Yeah, report back.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So that's something which comes up before we do the work programme. I'm sorry? Oh, we note that, yes. Note that, please. Date of our next meeting, item 9, 19th of March, 3:30. And any other business I consider urgent? There isn't. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you as well for attending us the first time. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
GLA, Committee Room 5, Sound.